So we'll now move on to our next panel session on reimagining EV adoption through game-changing investments and accelerated technology deployment, brought to us by Plug Me In. From the pivotal role of groundbreaking investments to the really swift deployment of cutting-edge technology, the market's transformation hinges on a series of strategic decisions, which we will explore in this next panel session. So please join me in welcoming on to stage our speakers. So, joining us on this panel are Andrew Stead, Commercial Director at Plug Me In, Andrew Mouat, Head of Smart Mobility at SCOTTISHPOWER, Arthur Mitchell, Head of Special Projects at OCTOPUS EV, and Caroline McCoy, who is Head of Network at British Gas Zero. I'll be moderating, but first over to Andrew from Plug Me In, who will say a few words just to set the scene for our session.
Thanks, Gill. That's a really kind intro. I'd start by saying I feel like I'm following in the footsteps of giants, and certainly following Oksana is an amazing thing to do, considering where we're at in this market. And actually, if you look at Plug Me In, none of you probably would have heard of us 4 years ago, and what an exciting opportunity that is for anybody to come into this marketplace and to grow. I think a lot of people have told everybody in this room throughout the last 2 days a similar theme. We need to make things easier, remove complexity, and make it hassle-free. And we certainly agree with that at Plug Me In. I do think, though, we've got our own story to tell, and we're going to get into that a bit today and go through that with our panelists. I think one of the things for us that's really important to do is just talk about state of the affairs, and I won't dwell on that because we're all very, very experienced in this space. Talk about the challenges that we're facing and then what we're doing within Plug Me In to try and move past those barriers. So certainly in the market today, we're seeing growth, which is really positive. Although it's a flat market, we're not seeing a lot of increase in overall registrations. We are seeing an increase in EV adoption, albeit small, 17.9% last year, coming up to 19% this year. So really great, but that still presents us with a problem. We've still got to get to 22% for ZEV mandate. And that increases year on year. So we've got to do stuff to try and work through that. I think one of the most important things for us to do is really concentrate how we can get through those barriers and all work together as a group to try and promote EV adoption in general. So at Plug Me In, what we did over the last year is we enlisted the help of Boston Consulting Group. We asked them to go out and interview over 2,000 consumers to try and get some insight from what's going on in the world and actually what they perceive to be the complexity, what's stopping them moving forward. You won't be surprised to hear that one of the major barriers for most people is the cost burden for getting a charger. And actually that increased as we looked out over the next 2 years. That complexity and cost looked like it was increasing, and therefore people's propensity to buy reduced as well as they saw it as a bigger burden. We also saw a lot of respondees talking about the complexity of charging, and that's something that I'll talk about in a moment, but certainly something we're addressing. What was good, and actually what Plug Me In is really able to deliver, is part of our wider business. Many of you will know Plug Me In as a leading EV charging installer for the likes of some of our partners that we've got here today, OCTOPUS, ScottishPower and British Gas. What you may not know is, though, that as a business, our heritage is asset ownership. In fact, Callison, as an organisation that owns Plug Me In and started it embryonically 4 years ago, is an asset ownership business and has circa 15 million smart meters installed that they own and operate across the UK today. And they've used that experience to leverage that to see what we could do within EV adoption. And certainly, far right of this screen talks to that point. We saw actually, with the cost being a burden, the majority of people that we spoke to saw that a lease option was really interesting, certainly in the domestic space. And actually, a lot of those people saw that leasing was something of interest and they'd happily pay more over a longer period of time. They just wanted that convenience and a low monthly reoccurring cost. One of the other things that we're really proud to do, and we're doing this with OCTOPUS right now, is we are their referral partner for any of their commercial opportunity that comes through from the Electroverse. We're doing an amazing job with OCTOPUS in supporting commercial installations, and we're using that charging as a service heritage that we've got to enable us to be able to deploy charging infrastructure without the upfront costs. It might not actually, we're finding a lot of the people that we engage with, it's not relevant to them that there's the cost itself, it's just the convenience of not having to go through the process of organising all of that investment. We're actually seeing at the moment around 50% of all our opportunities that come through to us landing as a charging as a service installation. So a really interesting change in the dynamics of the way that we're operating. And actually, we also built a prop that I'd be really interested to speak to anybody that would like to consider what they do about fleet transition in terms of having home chargers installed as part of a fleet under a charging as a service proposition. Again, to negate that risk of people leaving and having stranded assets. So I've whizzed through that 4 seconds ago. Gill, I'm sure you'll be really pleased that I've made that on time. And I'll hand over to Gill to introduce the rest of the session. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Some really great insight there. Really interesting to hear the direction that Plug Me In is going, not least of all because I am a very happy customer of Plug Me In. So fantastic to have you here supporting us today. So let's get straight to the panel then. And it's lovely to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining us. So Andrew, to you first, if I may. So you've talked about sort of the market situation, what some of the barriers are to adoption and, you know, what customers are looking for. And you have touched on this, but can you give us a little bit more detail as to actually what are you as Plug Me In doing to address this?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think we're very well positioned, firstly, by having a huge amount of customers that are in the energy space. And from our research, we actually saw that people looking at EV are 3 times more likely to buy an EV charger through an energy partner. So that shows sort of the brand recognition that you've got in there. And as a business, we're here to support with our funded solution, which we call charging as a service. It really enables people to get around those initial upfront cost concerns. But more than that, actually, our proposition is built also on the back of our metering heritage. So because of that, we have SIP accreditation, so we can go and pull the main fuse of the property. So we can really accelerate the timeline to get to a house. We're trying to reduce that upfront burden of gathering information. So actually, at the moment, we're able to get to site within 5 days to understand what's going on and then move to an installation. And we also are able to mobilise our meter reading team. So we've got circa 1,400 people that we can lean into, Gill, which go and do a home survey on behalf of the customer. So again, making that whole journey simple.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Because as a customer, I don't want to have to go and take a photo of my cutout. Yeah. Because, you know, I'm supposed to know what a cutout is and where it is, but I still, Yeah. So yeah, that is music to many customers' ears, I'm sure. Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Caroline, over to you. So really getting straight to the heart of this panel topic. How can we overcome barriers to EV adoption through those strategic investments and, you know, those advancements in technology?
Yeah, so I'd say that... am I not switched on?
That's you.
Yeah. Access to charging remains one of the main barriers to the mass EV adoption. If we want to make the vehicles accessible for every driver across the UK, we've got to tackle the inequality that exists between home and public charging. But that's only one piece of the puzzle. Delivering at-home and curbside charge point solutions with affordable charging costs, I believe, will go a long way to convince would-be EV drivers that the electric future can actually be achievable. We need to strike that balance, though, between home and public charging in order to create an easily accessible, cost-effective infrastructure that doesn't exclude anybody from that transition.
Thanks, Caroline, because we need to make sure that there is no driver that is being left behind in this transition. Absolutely. Thank you, Caroline. So Andrew, Scottish Power. So as a utility company, how do you leverage your buying power and customer base to really accelerate investment and roll out of low carbon technologies?
Yeah, people have a view of utilities and where they sit in the space, but I don't think there's any doubt that we have a role to play. And I think that falls into two main categories. So we've got the able to pay market, so people can afford to do this transition themselves without any support or subsidy. But we have to make sure as utilities that we bring the entirety of society with us, just as we've alluded to there. And costs, we know, we've discussed already, are a huge barrier to that. So obviously increasing the number of people who can afford to pay to purchase is one of the ways of doing that, and that all comes down to cost. So as a business, we benefit obviously from the ability to mass procure, and that gives OEMs and others confidence in the market and confidence in the pricing structures and business models they have. But we also have the ability to help customers all the way through the journey. So from the smart meter installation to the utility to the hardware installation. And what that means is we can leverage that whole customer journey to bring discounts and pass those efficiencies on to the consumer. So rather than just installing a piece of hardware, we can leverage that whole relationship and pass those savings on. I guess the other benefit we have as a utility is that we can bundle products, and we can deliver multiple options to customers, be it EV, I know that's primarily what we're talking about today, but PV, battery and heat pump or other elements of that. But of course then there's a whole tariff infrastructure, and everyone in the panel here has a variety of flexibility and fixed tariff options for consumers. And so I think that the question there is more about how we ensure that consumers pick the right tariff for them rather than them simply being offered. And I guess the other thing is that we have brand awareness, and so we're able to establish partnerships and relationships that can benefit consumers. And that a good example of that is for example, considering a lot of these things as home improvements, because we know they add value to the home. And so that means you can start to leverage low-cost finance, for example, in the form of a mortgage, and bundle a house sale with a home improvement and get some really interesting interest rates on that as well. So that kind of thing comes when big organizations start to talk to each other and transition. There's also the elephant in the room, and that is a lot of people can't afford to do this. So there's a lot utilities can do to ensure people can make this transition as well. Eco-funding is a good example of that, not specifically EV related, but leveraging our business as usual activity to ensure that those who can't afford are getting options around heat pumps in particular in that example. Another interesting thing we're looking at is how low carbon technologies affect health. And so we've got a trial on at the moment with Energy Systems Catapult, which looks at a warm home prescription service, just your subscriptions. But basically means that we know cold, damp homes exacerbate certain health issues. Can you get a prescription for insulation and a heat pump that will ultimately improve health, reduce the burden on the NHS, and again, just makes the whole thing more accessible. I think that's probably it, Jill, thanks.
Yeah, brilliant, thanks, Andrew. And just picking up what you said about tariffs as well, because I think that one of the hidden benefits actually as an EV driver is that if I'm on the right EV-friendly energy tariff, I can shift a lot of my other big energy use into those off-peak hours, and that's helping me manage and reduce my energy bills. But I don't hear that talked about very much, and maybe it is a relatively small benefit, but it's still one of those maybe an unintended benefit of transitioning to EV. Arthur, so just thinking about number of cars on the road, You know, we now have over 1.2 million electric cars registered in the UK. So not necessarily 1.2 million on the road, but that's the number that have been registered over the years. So what should we be doing as an industry to get to 10 million? And I think we're talking about 10 million here because I think if we continue on this trajectory, we're looking to reach about 8 to 10 million by 2030. And then, you know, what's OCTOPUS electric vehicles doing to really help us achieve those kind of numbers?
Yeah, I guess that's a mega question, right? Everything that we've been talking about the last day or so is about how to get to those sorts of numbers. I think there's all of the stuff that's happening at a technology standpoint, but really what we're talking about is moving from early adopters to maybe a more pragmatic group of people. And so we've got to understand what it is that will get them to make a switch. We've got to recognise that that means 5 or 6 million households sat around a kitchen having a conversation about whether they can live with an EV. Pretty sure that most of us are comfortable we can live with an EV, but it's not that easy a decision to make. And what we've heard from doing research recently is what they want and would be happy with, similar to everything we're hearing, right? A great lived experience with an EV, which is all the things we've just been hearing about in terms of great tariffs, good prices, all of the stuff around public charging working. It's also a great car. It's a great car with lots of space. It's pushing the boundaries of what a car can be. And it's at a great price. The price has to be there. And we've got, you know, we've gone a really, really long way on this. And I'm sure that the stuff that Mark was talking about yesterday in terms of where the prices are at, levelised cost of ownership, you're pretty close, if not already there. We've got to get the ticket price down of first-hand cars so that a driver looking at it go, yes, I can afford to make this change. We've got to give support to the second-hand market. Most people move into second-hand market. So salary sacrifice, fantastic thing. We'd love to see that extended and go as far as possible, but we need support across the spectrum. And then finally, I think this is something, Jill, you've been talking about a lot in terms of misinformation. Going back to that conversation in the kitchen, we're asking individuals to persuade their family, maybe they're the first person in that group of friends to move to an EV, to make that change, to be the person to decide for us. They might not, 10 million. Most of these people haven't been in an EV yet, and we're expecting them by 2030 to get in one. We've got to help. We've got to get out there. All of us, you're all advocates for EVs. We've got to get into the media and do what we can to fight misinformation, I think.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Arthur. Thank you so much. And I was talking to somebody earlier, because from having been involved in so many EV test drives over the years, it's just joyous seeing somebody have a go in an EV for the first time and they come out with the big EV grin on their face. And I was asking somebody, is that the same for electric trucks as well? And apparently, yes, it is. So we're headed in the right direction for sure. Caroline, back to you. How do we address consumer concerns around the cost of EV charging to really help boost our transition to EV?
Yeah, the perception about being sustainable within a household seems to conflict with reducing bills, and that's a barrier that we really need to overcome. Customers need reassurance that moving to a more sustainable energy solution, the ability to charge their vehicle when the demand on the grid is at the lowest, that's what we really need to be emphasising with our customers. And that's why we've launched our free charge proposition. So I don't know how many of you in the room have heard about free charge, but it's a market-leading offer that's going to provide our customers who purchase a Hive charger from us with 12 months free charging. Once they're on one of our smart tariffs, the free charge tool will automatically charge the EV whenever the grid is at its quietest. So customers get access to cheaper rates and the energy is greener too.
That sounds amazing, Caroline. Thank you for sharing that with us. Andrew Stead, plug me in. Back to you.
Thank you.
So, we know that investors have been nervous. They've lost a degree of confidence, which has had an impact undoubtedly. So what would you, and this is a big question, what would you like to see from the new government to help reinvigorate that confidence?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be a difficult time, isn't there, when you go through that adoption curve. I'm really pleased that we work in a place where actually we're driving forward, and there's so much enthusiasm actually from our shareholders at BlackRock, MODERATOR, Goldman Sachs. They are laser focused on growth. However, one of the barriers that's immediately a problem for us as an investor and asset owner in EV adoption is the way that if we can get any funding associated to that charging infrastructure, you can't apply that if we're the owner for it. So from a government perspective, it's really good to enable us as the private sector to unlock that cash without having that cost comparison where somebody might be able to get a huge amount of funding through whatever mechanism that we can't get access to as a private investor. So for me, that's a really big piece of the puzzle that will help us put all of that infrastructure in place and enable people to grow. I think David Watts said yesterday from Antrucks around the amount of car parking spaces there are in the UK. I can't remember the number, but it was a big number. It was millions. And we talk about access to 4 million, thank you, David. And we talk about access to, giving people that don't have a driveway access to charging. Workplace charging is fantastic. We can really make that seamlessly easy and in terms of the installation and the cost burden of doing that by having that as an asset that we give to the company. And they can do what they want with, right? They can set whatever tariff they want. They can use that infrastructure however they see fit. And that just creates a huge amount of spaces in which people can use it when they don't have a driveway at home. So for me, that's one of the biggest things that I would say if I reflected on it, Jill.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Andrew. Okay. I'm not going to say other Andrew, Scottish Power Andrew. Low carbon technologies are facing a number of barriers at the moment, as we know. From the cost of implementation, consumer confidence, lack of knowledge, and I guess simply the hassle factor in our already busy lives. So how do we address these issues and convince customers that actually transitioning to low carbon technologies it's not just the right thing to do, but it's going to really benefit them in the long run?
Yeah, I have a lot of sympathy for consumers because there's a lot of misinformation, as we've touched on, from a variety of agendas. But the really cool thing about EVs is they tick a lot of boxes. So they're fun to drive, right? They're attractive. They're cost effective for an increasing number of people. That they require less maintenance. They are generally a more sustainable choice. So regardless of your drivers as an individual, they are a good option, generally speaking. And those are the sort of direct benefits. But what we don't touch on or won't talk about a whole lot of is some of the indirect benefits that EVs can bring to the wider sector. So the impact on wider energy system is going to be really, really important. So even if you don't own an EV, even if you don't drive, the fact that the UK is transitioning to EVs will bring benefits to the entire energy supply chain, and you will benefit as a result as a consumer. So we talk about investment in transmission and distribution systems, that's fine, but what we don't talk about is that when you have a huge number of distributed, decentralized, local battery storage units, you don't need as many generation sources. So having EVs will mitigate how many power stations we need to build, and therefore how much through charges are passed on to you as a consumer through your bill. So EVs, in a sense, are a route to cheaper energy. But they're also facilitating technology. So yes, they provide a function in that they're a vehicle and you drive them to wherever you need to go, but they also add value to other products. And the obvious example there is PV and EV and the benefits of those two technologies, the synergies of those. And that in turn will mitigate our reliance on imported energy and the fluctuating markets that creates. And we've seen just in the last few months the impact that's had on all of our bills. So that more resilient energy supply chain, a lot of that is facilitated by EVs, and then turn the price benefit that brings. And where utilities can support customers, and we've touched on some of this already today, is in driving the quality of those hardware installations and technologies, and improving that consumer confidence as a result, be it in a commercial or domestic setting. And primarily that's due to the fact that utilities tend to deliver good quality products, they tend to have good quality supply chain partners, and they don't tend to go anywhere. So if you do have a problem, which is rare, you know where to go, and those organizations will be around for the life of the product. We also need to act as continued sources of trusted information. So we need to combat that misinformation that's out there. And we need to combine that with a simple, accessible means of consumers accessing this technology. And if we can combine that with the reduced cost of acquisition, that that's going to be really, really important. So I guess coming back to the question, Gill, is all the stuff we've talked about, but actually we need to get better at communicating both those direct and indirect benefits for the market.
Yeah, totally agree there, Andrew. And I think that's a theme that's been coming through loud and clear, both here and, and for quite some time now. But I will say it was just so encouraging to see in mainstream media this morning, actually, the report from Charge UK that Vicky Reid talked about yesterday, focused on data from New Automotive, underpinned by ZapMap data, of course, talking about the numbers of public charge points. Really, really encouraging, really positive coverage. So let's see more of that, please, to really start to cut through. And I'm going to go to questions now. So we've got a few minutes left. So do we have any questions? Is that David up there? Yes, David. Could we get a mic? And David, if you wouldn't mind just saying your full name and where you're from, please.
Thanks. Yeah, hi. David Watts, MAN Trucks, in case you weren't here yesterday. This section is about reimagining EV adoption, and a common thing that has come up in a number of panels is the idea of price parity and the need for price parity. And so my short question is, why do we think we need the price parity? And I'll explain that in the sense that we already have a system in car buying where there isn't price parity. So everyone has a budget, 500, 5,000, 50,000 pounds, whatever it might be. And depending on what type of car they want and what brand they want, that dictates how old the car is. So if you want a mid-size hatchback Astra type car and you have a certain amount of money, you might be able to get a 2-year-old one, but if you want a premium brand, you're going to get a 3 or a 4-year-old one. How do we change, under the banner of reimagining EV adoption? EVs are going to be more expensive for the foreseeable future. So how do we change that narrative that actually it's okay? It just dictates, it's just another element to, I would normally have a 3-year-old car, but if I want an EV, it's going to be a 4-year-old car, and that's okay because the price is not the issue in that sense. So how do we reimagine price parity into a different message?
I'm so desperate to answer that, but I'm not going to because it's for the panel to answer. So who would like to go first?
Yeah, I was going to say, it feels like one for you, Arthur, to be honest.
So I think I'll answer directly in a second, but there's the parallels to the ICE market in terms of the story you're telling, in terms of what age of car you take, is very clear that customers are willing to do that because it's exactly what's happened over the last 2 years in terms of the residual values of ICE cars going up with supply chain challenges. But for me, it's about messaging. If we can message that these cars are comparable prices at the top end, it just gets us in the door to have a conversation about, well, we're talking about 10 million EVs. That's a very big number. This is quite a big thing to knock over. If we can knock it over, it's easier to have the conversations. I don't disagree with any of the points in terms of where the prices are, but just from a messaging point of view, wouldn't it be a lot easier? Now, the one thing that you did say, which is they won't get to the same price parity, I think we had a previous chat was about Chinese EVs. There clearly are paths to having cheaper cars, whether it's through innovation, through competition, through new entrants. We're headed there. But yeah, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but the messaging would be easier if we were there, I think.
Maybe just on the charging aspect of that, I don't think we do have to get to parity. There are components within that pricing structure that I think could get closer together, VAT being an obvious one. But I think what we need to do is get better at explaining to consumers what they get for their money. So ultra-rapid charging on the go is very, very different from charging at home through your own electricity tariff. So I think, again, it's just about messaging and being very clear and open and transparent with consumers about what they get. It's very much more expensive to deploy charging infrastructure in the public realm than it is to put a charger on the wall in your home. And that comes with both OPEX and CAPEX implications. So I think we just need to be a bit more open and honest about that with consumers.
Yeah. Do we have another question?
Hi, it's Tom from MyEnergy. Oh, is that on? There we go. Sorry, it's Tom from MyEnergy. I just wondered if the panel thought there was currently, if you like, too much focus, talking about price again actually, but too much focus maybe on the pure price of particularly the EV charging side for devices as opposed to sort of bringing out the words investments and technology from the panel description. Shouldn't we be encouraging consumers to invest in technology and seeing the benefit of that rather than just pushing price. So what we're seeing a lot in the market, I'd argue, is people obsessing about the pure end cost of the device as opposed to actually talking about the technology and the benefits to the consumer. And actually, we've seen really negative outcomes of that in other markets. So where we see things like heat pump installations that are poor quality, it tends to be driven on price. Where we saw the solar installations, poor quality solar installations, again, driven on price by putting manufacturers under pressure to basically keep on eking out every single dollar. Actually, that doesn't necessarily have a great customer experience. So does the panel really think that people are in the sector, in the value chain, focused enough on that investment in technology as opposed to just saying, what's the cheapest you can do me?
Andrew.
I was going to say, thanks, Tom, by the way. That's a great question. Yeah, nice to see you as well. I mean, I think certainly from the research we did with Boston Consumer, actually price wasn't the driving factor. It was more about how they covered that cost. And I think we could wrap this up in the same with David's question around when we look at the cost of the vehicle. Actually, there are real synergies here with what's that total cost of ownership over a period of time, which is a completely different position to how we talk about ICE vehicles in many ways. And I agree with Tom, actually, also about poor quality installs and how that can lead to price being a driven point. Actually, the opposite can also be true, and we need to talk more about that. And I think that's why one of the things we were very keen to do at Plug Me In was to own all of the installation capabilities across all of those assets. So whether that's solar, battery, heat, or EV, we deliver that through our dedicated team nationwide, and they all go through a really clear academy training. And I know some of the work we've done with British Gas is really key, actually, in terms of that initial site evaluation, certainly with heat specifically, that you can get to the right price, the right fit, the right output for that site. So I would say this, Tom, I think you're right. We need to change the narrative 100%, and I think that will only come as we all start removing the hassle, removing the complexity, and start talking about that total cost of ownership.
Okay, thanks so much, Andrew. And I'm going to wrap up this panel session there. Thank you so much to our brilliant panellists. Thank you, Arthur, Andrew, Caroline, and Andrew. Thanks, everybody.